right, hello and welcome to another episode of Drive With Me. Typically, I would be recording this usually in the morning on my drive to work. But today ended up having an important phone call in the morning, and so I'm actually recording this on the way home from work. But I wanted today to actually talk about a more positive subject because it really does feel and seem as I go back and not only discuss these topics while recording, but then go back and edit the videos, right? And have listened to myself all over again and suffering through listening to my own voice. It hits me just how many of the topics that I discuss are just negative. And now that's just the nature of our day and age and the topics that we're discussing. We don't really just generally list off things that are okay and then move on, right? It's usually more like, this needs to change, and this is why I'm creating a YouTube, discussion channel to begin with, right? But today, I really did want to hit on something positive, at least for myself personally. So over the weekend, I've been resisting going in and picking up new copies of any kind of games. I've been muddling my way through the Ghost of Yotei, the game, right? And really wanted to push myself to finish it before getting anything else that would be added to my backlog. But I've really had my eye on 007, First Light, Saros, and Pragmata in particular as games that have come out this year. I've heard good things about Crimson Desert and some other ones, but here and there. And there probably are some smaller indie titles or, just small titles. I think it's called Darwin's Paradox. It's like an octopus, right, game. It's like a 2.5D, side-scrolling kind of game. That actually seems pretty cool, admittedly, so I may pick that up at some point, just as off the top of my head examples, right? So there may be other things I grab, but given all the news lately about, that's just really negative, Xbox layoffs and Sony struggling with Bungie and Marathon not doing well, and now Sony shutting down the PS3 and Vita storefronts and announcing they're killing discs for their PlayStation consoles as of 2028. And now they're revamping Crunchyroll to require more expensive tiers to access their store, and various just things like this. I'm kind of, at a little bit of a limit lately as to the amount of negativity that I can take on from corporate America right now. And so I just wanted to discuss something fun, because we still have video games, right? We still have fun titles. And the first game that I popped in after going this weekend and finally grabbing Pragmata, Saros, and 007 was First Light, the 007 game. And I've been having a blast with it, man. I have not had this much fun in years, and playing through it has given me feelings that I had, the level of excitement and enjoyment that I would have had, say, playing Uncharted, really any of the games, but most recently Uncharted 4 or the Mass Effect series, or would have some of my favorite games. It kind of rolls a number of those elements into one. At least thus far, it's told a really tight story. I'm really enjoying it. It's pretty awesome. I've heard good things about Pragmata and Saros, and I like each of those, types of games. And so I'm trying to enjoy not only the positive things in the industry and the games that are still coming out and are doing well, but I also grabbed them on disc. I actually went to GameStop to do it. And I don't have a huge amount of love for GameStop as a company, but they do sell the physical discs, and I was able to get 2 of them, I believe. I think 007 and Pragmata were pre-owned. They don't give you a huge discount. I think I got $5 off on one. It was $65, and I think it was Pragmata that was $55, so I got $15 off roughly. So I'm okay, awesome. It's not much, but still it was pretty cool. I'm supporting the secondary market, supporting discs, adding to my physical collection. I like that. I don't even know if these games are fully on the disc. At the very least, they're, all of them have day one patches and stuff, but it's still the best we pretty much have at this point in time. And so, yeah, it's been pretty great. It's nice just to kind of turn your brain off a little bit and just sit down and enjoy a game. As a man who is in his late 30s, married with 3 children, and a full-time job, and just a whole bunch of debt that comes along with having a graduate degree and trying to save up for a house, and this kind of thing. It's been a lot. So it's nice it's actually really quite fun, for lack of a better term, to just sit back and play through 007. It's been really cool. And kind of great that we can still do that, you know? And I can still do it with a disc, at least for the time being. And as long as I can collect discs, I will be. And for pretty much every major release. That does not mean that I'm like shunning digital or anything like that. Like I said, some, especially your smaller games, or if there's a good deal, like Cyberpunk 2077, for example, there was a deal, I want to say almost 2 years ago now, and it was like around the holidays, and I ended up picking it up. It was like the complete edition with the new game update and the Phantom Liberty expansion, and I had so much fun with that game. It was a blast, right? And I got it digitally, and I don't regret it at all, because there are certain games like that where I'm like, I've been waiting. Baldur's Gate 3, I ended up having to pick that up digitally. I've not completed it yet still. I've burnt myself out on it a couple of different times, and then I'll go back to it later, and I probably will do so again, more than likely. Same thing with Alan Wake 2. I think that was digital only. I waited until that was on PlayStation, the game, like the Plus game catalog, but that's another great game that I've been playing through here and there. So I have a bad habit of I go in with the intention of finishing one game at a time, and then realistically that rarely happens. And so the games that I do tend to do that for are ones that really hook me. Sometimes it just maybe happens to come out at a time in my life that I happen to have a bunch of time on my hands, but that's not really what's going on now. But in the past, that might have been the case. And or I just happen to get through it fairly quickly because it's a fairly easy or fun campaign to play through, and then I'm kind of done, right? Like, for example, the Warhammer Space Marine 2. Like, that was a great example of, I had a blast with that game. I bought it on disc. I really enjoyed it. Played a little bit of the multiplayer. It felt like an old school, like, game that, while it looks better, would have, like it functionally was like a game you would have picked up on the Xbox 360 with the same kind of features and so on. And I love that, even though I got it on my PlayStation. And yet after playing it for a while, I kind of, uninstalled it, tucked the disc away. It's in my collection now, and honestly probably won't touch it again for the foreseeable future, but I may bust it out again later. But that's what I love about this, is I've increasingly tried to functionally stop beating myself up over not completing games. Like, for example, I'm actually really quite enjoying Ghost of Yotei. Not quite as much as I did Ghost of Tsushima, but it's still a really good game. And yet, if I don't finish it, I really am not going to beat myself up about it at all. Like, you know what? It was still worth it. I'm glad I have it for my collection. I'm glad I can go back. Unless my, PlayStation 5 itself bricks for some reason, I can still play that game, pretty much in perpetuity. And I like having that functionality, especially hearing another, to go, I guess, double back to a negative thing real quick, hearing that after 36 months, of non-use, apparently Sony reserves the right to delete your PlayStation profile entirely, which includes access to all of the games that you purchase, which really feels shady and should be illegal. It's one of those things that really should be, but our laws have just not caught up to the times at all. Like digital rights ownership and stuff, and digital security, and all sorts of things related to the internet and computers and gaming and anything in kind of that sphere. American law is really just not up to date on. As time goes on, it probably will. My guess is if you fast forward like 50 years, we'll probably have stronger consumer protections. But for the time being, we really don't. And like certain places like Brazil or the European Union or what have you may be further along in that regard, but the United States is going to take a while, I imagine. So we're not really geared right now towards a whole lot of taking consumer preference into account and consumer protection. In fact, this current administration apparently has kind of gutted the consumer, Consumer Finance Protection Bureau or whatever. It's like CFPB, I think. And, but anyway, so it makes me that much more glad that I picked up as many games as I could on disc, because even if my PlayStation Network account is entirely gone, I can still pop in my copy of Space Marine 2 and Borderlands 4 and Stellar Blade and I don't know, any number of other games. I think I got, probably close to 20 games on the PS5 now that are disc-based, even if my digital library went away. And I'm not planning on that happening anytime soon, but I guess most people that have that, or may have that happen to them, probably wouldn't be planning on it either. So here's hoping that Sony doesn't really pull the trigger on that, and that eventually we get laws to ban that sort of practice. At least for a certain amount of time, more reasonable than 36 months. That's 3 years of not touching your account and it gets deleted after you could have been using it for a decade or more and collecting digital games, and all of a sudden just boom, gone. That seems really very corporate greed nonsense to me. So anyway, everybody's entitled to their own opinions on that. But anyway, so really glad that I have these games on discs. Looking forward to playing them all. I'm hoping that I have a pretty smooth ride with 007 First Light, and I have yet to decide which one I want to touch on next, whether it be Saros or Pragmata, but I am probably not going to pick up another game until Wolverine comes out. And honestly, I'm passing on Grand Theft Auto 6 at the very least for the foreseeable future for a variety of reasons. One, I've never been a huge Grand Theft Auto fan. Two, I'm not paying $80 for a base game, and I'm sure as heck not paying $100 for that game. And I really don't want to reward what I believe is functionally greed for basically, even if you buy a box version, you just get a digital code. I don't like this at all. I may give a pass to some studios that are wanting to go digital only, for like Larian with Baldur's Gate 3, maybe even Remedy with Alan Wake 2. It may delay my purchase of that game, but at least I understand it. With Rockstar, there is no excuse. They're doing it simply because they want to, and it's easier for them, and they can get away with it, and they know it. That's all it is. So I think I'm kind of on at that point where I like Rockstar and what they bring to the table, and if I'm being honest, I will almost definitely play GTA 6 eventually. I'm just planning on waiting until the hype has died down. I've seen reviews, maybe even give it a year or two and pick it up at a discount, kind of like what I did with Cyberpunk 2077, right? You wait a while, and it's probably not going to have anywhere close to that kind of the rough launch that Cyberpunk did, but it doesn't really matter to me. Ultimately, I'll pick it up when I'm good and ready and there's a decent price for it, because right now it is not high on my list, and I'm actually at this age really getting tired of the gaming industry's increased monetization and greedy corporatization of the entire industry in a way that I've seen develop over the course of pretty much my entire life at this point, but it's gotten notably worse in recent years. It's accelerating the rate at which gaming companies are trying to extract more and more while giving us less and less. They're spinning off features increasingly that would have been included in a game in previous years or decades that are increasingly things that we need to pay extra for. Even things like cosmetics and stuff. In fact, that's probably one of the notable ones. You used to be able to collect cosmetics in a lot of games, and now they have you pay for all of them. And it allows them to sidestep the whole, you pay to win argument. No, you're not paying to win, you're just paying to look like Nicki Minaj or Dwayne The Rock Johnson or whatever in Fortnite, right? And that we're paying for dances or whatever the heck the options are, right? So they still make tons of money over things that in a game 20 years ago you would have just unlocked, or maybe you get a DLC pack or whatever, but it would have almost definitely been a better deal for the consumer. And nowadays they don't care, and they've been grooming a whole generation and a half roughly on this newfound free-to-play digital transaction model. And I, for one, am not a fan. Maybe I really am, I think, slowly becoming that grumpy old guy that just wants my box with a disc drive that plays mostly single-player games in the corner, and I don't really want to interact with anybody else. I don't need the multiplayer. I don't need nor want the always online. In fact, part of me is really upset now that I bought Diablo 4 because it is always online, and so it doesn't even matter that I own the disc. It's just only accessible via, an internet connection anyway, and I feel like that should be generally unacceptable. But a lot of these corporations, they don't care as long as they sell enough, and they just keep pushing it. But it has definitely contributed to me not buying expansions for Diablo 4, though. And I think I'm moving more and more explicitly in the direction of, if it's a digital only launch, it's really only acceptable if it's a smaller studio or there's a smaller game, like a really specific reason for it. Like maybe like that Prince of Persia game that came out a little while ago. That was like a side scroller, real like bright, vibrant, like 2.5D art style. I forget exactly what it was subtitled, but like that game was a good example of, like, I'd pick that up digitally, right? Darwin's Paradox, another one. I picked that up. Pretty much any indie game like that's acceptable. If you're a AAA studio and you're trying to push us on digital only, no. And especially if you're not offering a discount. And then in the case of GTA 6, you're charging $80 as the standard. And that you're gonna turn around and they're gonna create either, whether it be DLC or microtransactions or whatever they end up calling it or framing these things as. There's going to be additional content. There's almost definitely going to be a GTA 6 online mode that's then going to be pushing subscriptions. Like, the amount of money that they are expecting to pull out of this game, Grand Theft Auto 6, over time is likely to be kind of mind-numbing, and will probably put GTA 5 to shame. And that game already made a friggin' ton of money. So, and in my not so humble opinion, I don't feel it's that great of a game. Like, sure, it's GTA, so yeah, it's going to be massive, but yeah, I find myself now wanting to pull away from that trend of rewarding AAA games and studios and publishers for being so incredibly greedy, even by comparison to the profit-driven, means that they would use in, years and decades past. It just really is getting to the point it's not okay anymore. And I think Sony announcing the lack of disc support after 2028 is definitely, that's feeling like a straw that breaks the camel's back kind of moment for me. And I really am planning on increasingly moving towards PC. I'll collect discs as long as I can on PlayStation. Kind of already moving away from Xbox. There's really not a huge amount of point in owning one at this point. I pretty much have shifted all of that over, and even my Game Pass stuff that my son really wants. When I do play a Game Pass game, it's pretty much on my PC at this point. And increasingly, I think I'll be moving that way away from PlayStation. And it'll narrow down to basically I got a PC and a Nintendo Switch 2. And I'll probably collect physical games on Switch 2. I'll grab what I can from the GOG or Good Old Games store. But admittedly, their selection isn't super great, unfortunately. I'd love for it to be, a bit more robust. But if they offer DRM-free games that doesn't have to boot up through their platform, which I love. So I definitely want to support that. They offer really good deals, too. So maybe picking up free games through Epic, using the GOG store when I can, and then a lot of the rest through Steam. That's at least been less corporate-y and less nonsensical than the stuff that Microsoft, Sony, and sometimes Nintendo were pulling. And so I'll just be one of those that I think kind of ages out of the PlayStation ecosystem, because they seem to be going for a demographic that is younger than me now, and it is what it is. But in the meantime, I will continue enjoying 007 and Pragmata and Saros and Wolverine and other games that come out of, that God of War, Lao Fei, I believe it's pronounced, the one about his wife and like what she's going through, and I'm presuming some form of afterlife based on the trailer. And that admittedly looks pretty awesome. I know a lot of people have complained, or some people have complained about it. I'm a huge fan of the God of War series. Even before the reboot, I was a fan of it. The old hack and slash ones. I jumped in originally in God of War 2 on the PlayStation 2. And then eventually got the collection and played that on PlayStation 3. And so it was real pumped when there was the 2018, reboot. And loved Ragnarok. So while I know that it's in some respects it's kind of more of the same, it's different enough that I'm really looking forward to it, and I think it should be a good thing. And my understanding though is that Wolverine and Lao Fei, the God of War game, have been advertised as having discs, and like having like digital deluxe versions, collector's editions, whatever the heck they're calling them, right, alongside their digital deluxe editions and so on. So that's cool. And I mean, I guess they're like, yay, you're selling these on discs and selling collector's editions and so on, in kind of an old school manner while you're still making discs, but with the very explicit, knowledge that we're shutting it down after next year. We basically have the rest of 2026 and then 2027 to collect discs and on PlayStation consoles, and then it's done. And that would line up with the likely holiday 2027 launch of the PlayStation 6, unless they push it off. But my understanding is nowadays a lot of these hardware development like timelines are often kind of locked in at a fairly early date. So I don't know what Sony's plan is exactly. I mean, obviously none of us really do, nor the same thing goes for like Microsoft and whatever their Xbox Project Helix ends up being. But I've currently owned every generation of Xbox while it was a current generation Xbox, right? So the original, the 360, the One, and now the Series consoles. And I very seriously doubt that I'm going to do that this next time, because I've used my Series X a lot less than I hoped I would have, and really increasingly moved over to PC. Nintendo's actually kept me pretty intrigued and hooked into their ecosystem with the Switch 2, and I was pleasantly surprised with how well the Switch ended up performing in the game availability. And even with the Switch 2, they're coming out with like first-party titles pretty consistently. They're not seeing the same kind of massive explosion in the cost of game development that other big AAA studios and publishers are seeing. They're keeping it simple, like, yes, their visuals are getting better and so on, but they're fundamentally releasing the same kind of Nintendo games now that they did 5, 10, 20 years ago. And I kind of love that. It's kind of nice to see that despite all these changes, and Nintendo can get a little greedy here and there, and they're still providing updated hardware every so many years and so on, but they still stay pretty Nintendo-y about the whole thing. And I like that, and I hope it stays that way. It's maybe not quite the glory days of the Wii and the Nintendo DS with Reggie Fils-Aimé and Hitoru Iwata at the helm of Nintendo and Nintendo of America, respectively. But it's Nintendo's still doing all right. Like, the frustrations I had with them with the game key cards and their the high cost of like Mario Kart and so on from last year really feels quaint nowadays. I'm like, oh yeah, Microsoft and Sony were like, yeah, hold my beer, I'm gonna be really pissing off a lot of the core gamers now. And so I'm kind of back to being like, I'm just going to settle into enjoying the Switch, and that probably being the last bastion of physical media in gaming that I have for the foreseeable future. And maybe eventually, quite possibly eventually, that will go away too. It wouldn't surprise me if the Switch 3 or whatever its successor ends up being is just digital only. But funny thing is like, I saw a report talking about how many nations don't have access to PlayStation Network, and that's actually part of the reason why I thought that Sony would put a hold on truly getting rid of physical media, is largely because there are a lot of places on the planet that don't have great internet and don't have access to PlayStation Network and so on. And so I thought that, hey, maybe that's like our saving grace, even here in the West. Sony has its fan base around the world, and maybe that's what keeps discs going for us. And then, of course, as of the beginning of July here, so a few weeks ago now, they announced that was not the case. It's not enough to save us, which is really disappointing. Part of me is hoping that Sony kind of not reverses course, but like sidesteps and is like, you know what, we've actually partnered with another disc manufacturing company, and they're going to release disc. We're going to allow like limited run games and so on to come out physically, but now physical games are maybe $10 more expensive per pop or something, and Sony's not doing it directly, and it's like a licensed thing exclusively through another company. Like, sure, and they just accept they make basically no money off of those, but maybe there's enough backlash that they at least kind of pivot to that. But it would not surprise me at all if Sony doesn't do that at all, right? That there's just no interest. We're shoehorning everybody into this digital only ecosystem because that's how they maximize and really juice their profits as much as physically possible. And a lot of us older school gamers that really want physical media to continue, that have already been frustrated by a lot of the digital rights management issues and always online features and live service and microtransactions and so many things that have bugged me and many others about how the industry has changed over the last number of years. They've been pushed through anyway. Like, that's, as the guy that's getting close to 40, I have seen a lot of things that I didn't want to happen in this country, whether it be in gaming or not. So I'm like, yeah, do I realistically think that anything we do or anything we complain about is going to change Sony's mind about this? And in regards to physical discs, probably not. No, I would be shocked if it did, honestly. I think it was unusual that back in 2013, Microsoft stating that they were going to do many of these same things, digital rights, always online, that kind of thing, that it was curtailed so much because of the backlash of gamers. I think that was honestly probably one of the last big moments that we had the ability to do that, because the Xbox One just didn't do well, right? But I don't think Sony's is in that position. They have a much stronger position in the market, and they know it, and I do not think that we gamers have the edge on this one. And if we do, I think it's going to require a long-term commitment to changing our spending habits. And I know that's what I'm planning on doing. So, but I mean, I'm just, like anybody else, I'm just one drop in the bucket. So I will probably have very little impact on it, and I'll probably need to be moving on from much of the PlayStation ecosystem. I may at some point even be at risk of having my entire digital game library deleted, but I'll always have my bloody discs, which is why I'm going to keep collecting them for the time being, and encourage you guys to do the same. And then when that's done, I think we should increasingly move over to supporting Nintendo's physical efforts, even as, not always great as they are, like with game key cards, but at least that and or PC, and move increasingly over to that market. So anyway, definitely recommend 007 First Light, though. If you guys are a fan of like action adventure games and like a good story and like spy thrillers or anything along those lines, highly recommend it. So if you stuck around this long, thank you. I kind of rambled about a bunch of different stuff in the industry, and I came into it wanting to be like exclusively positive, and ended up being like definitely more mixed than I wanted, more negative than I had intended. But honestly, it is what it is. So thank you all. If you stuck around this far, please hit like if you did, and otherwise, y'all take care. If you enjoy talk of technology, politics, culture, etc., feel free to stick around, because we'll be talking more about it later.